columns represent confirmed cases. They couldn't do very much about it here or here, but they started fiddling with the figures. So they caused a sustained, huge outbreak of poliomyelitis, but they started discarding most of the cases. That's the word they used in the paper, discarding. But I praise them for publishing it this way.
But what about Australia? Aren't outbreaks occurring due to low vaccination levels? Well, Dr. Mark Donoghue, a Sydney medical doctor, can put us in the picture here.
I also want to say something about where this figure of 51%, we have lower vaccination rates than third world countries. We have a minister who has stood up and said, I intend to get 90% vaccination rates by the time I leave here. We've got to think about this ABS study. The Australian Bureau of Statistics study, right through the paper, says what all the shortcomings are. There are certain states in which it was able to check its information. It found it overestimated the unvaccinated group by a factor of 50%. There were, in fact, when you look at recall, ask the parents, did you vaccinate? Half of the people who said no had actually vaccinated. They just didn't know it. They'd forgotten it. There was some missing information. The Australian Bureau of Statistics does not suggest 51% vaccination rates. It says it's around 51% for a child having got all vaccines from age 1 to 6, all on time. What's the major reason that people didn't get it? It was the Haemophilus influenza B that the doctors didn't even know they should be giving it. 51% is just not true. If you look at the vaccination for the majority of those diseases, you're finding figures between 75 and 90%, exactly the same as have been done in other studies. Why aren't the real figures used? Because it does not suit government to say there isn't a problem. In the push to keep on going and keep on going, figures are drawn out of mid-air. The trouble is we're reporting it with only a clinical impression. Most of these cases now are not confirmed by laboratories, not confirmed by cultures. We don't know much about where the cases are coming from. It is just a number appearing out of the blue. It's expected not because there's been an increase in pertussis, but because we had a media event and pressure on doctors from every corner. And I know this because I get the doctors' journals and papers on every corner to push vaccination, to push it, not let a child go, never waste an opportunity in your surgery, never let people think that the adverse reactions may outweigh the benefits. Now, after 6 months of that, the success of it can be measured that doctors are not reporting the adverse reactions, but are now reporting the cases of those that are missed. And that we also have strange things with this. The cases that are being reported are in fact in states where they have the highest vaccination rates.
But vaccination seems to sound great in theory, and we know that about 80 to 95% of the time it induces the production of antibodies. So why is it not working?
What is going to alter our whole concept of vaccines and immunity is the epidemic of AIDS. We were taught that antibodies meant protection against the disease. We were taught that a person was immunised or vaccinated, they developed antibodies and protected them against the disease. In actual fact, this was never really true. Certainly, it so happens in most cases that antibodies go with a measure of protection. They don't mean protection, it just happens to go along with the protection. In the same way that most cars happen to have 4 wheels. But you can, of course, have cars with only 3 wheels, or cars with 6 wheels. They're still cars. When the AIDS epidemic started, it was clearly shown that the antibodies, instead of meaning protection, meant that you were doomed. So suddenly people had to change the whole concept and say, well, yes, antibodies really don't mean protection after all. Now you can have, even with simple diseases like measles and rubella and a whole lot of other diseases like that, you can be loaded with antibodies and still get the disease and still even die from the disease. You may have no antibodies and not catch the disease. So this concept of antibodies that we are taught as students is wrong, and many other things are wrong, and I believe that it's going to be the AIDS epidemic which is forcing doctors to look at infectious diseases in a different way, and eventually will demonstrate quite clearly that our use of vaccines is not based on good science.
So, what do antibodies actually mean? Well, they simply show that the body has been exposed to the germ, that's all. Now normally, a virus comes in through the mouth, the nose, the tonsils, the skin or the mucous membranes. These outer layers of defence are now being recognised as very important for the protection of our vital organs within. But not only that, they are also in fact crucial in the process of developing immunity to that germ. By injecting vaccines, we're of course, ironically, bypassing these crucial processes. So, we are preventing immunity from being even achievable, plus actually increasing the risk of harm. And it is not only the relevant germ that's injected. So what else goes in with it? Well, to start with, some very toxic substances, such as formaldehyde, mercury and aluminium.
Went into the Poisons Information Centre to ask them if formaldehyde was safe, because I found out that formaldehyde was in the vaccines. I asked them, was there any safe amount? They said no, under no circumstances was any formaldehyde to be administered in a child's body. This is one of the ingredients in the DPT vaccine. I then rang up the Commonwealth Serums laboratories in Canberra. I spoke to a doctor there to find out what formaldehyde was doing in the vaccine. He said not to worry, it only comes from squashed up ants. Nothing to be alarmed about. One says this, the other says this. I can't make sense of it. And I still wonder, what is formaldehyde doing in a vaccine?
We're also getting a lot of problems with toxicity, and I find a lot of people that have risks perhaps with aluminium and some of the mercury problems. Now they may be connected in mercury with the fillings, but you may get in patients who've had no fillings and not much history of high fish contamination, where the other problems with mercury come from. And you have to suspect the fixatives that go into making vaccinations. There are a lot of toxic material goes in there.
Some of the ingredients, like formalin, which is a known carcinogen, thiomersol, which is a mercury derivative, aluminium phosphate, and we know that aluminium has been linked to Alzheimer's disease. These chemicals are routine parts of vaccines.
That was Dr. Peter Baratossi, an Adelaide medical doctor. It's worth adding that in each dose, each of these chemicals can be at levels of up to 0.025%. So, what else is in vaccines? Well, vaccines are cultured in cells from animal organs, which can be contaminated with unlimited, unknown animal viruses. They can only test for the very few that have already been identified. The monkey virus SV40 contaminated polio vaccines which were given to millions of children in the 50s and 60s and has been found to cause brain tumours, often many years later. There is also strong evidence of contamination by another certain monkey virus, SIV, a close relative of HIV. Let's hear from Dr. Mark Donoghue and dog breeder Ashley Alton, concerned about this contamination issue.
You can now convert a virus which used to exist in a monkey line or a different line, didn't kill them. If you convert it even slightly through the processing of a vaccine, then you can introduce it into an unrelated species, namely humans.
The parvovirus itself, which is one of the main problems in dogs at the moment, did not exist until the late 1970s, when it appeared almost simultaneously worldwide. There were two theories put forward by the researchers and vets regarding the sudden appearance of this new disease, both of which were related to vaccines.
I remember Mendelssohn saying that it may be that you only get one chance to make one big mistake in vaccination because of the numbers of people vaccinated. If you introduce a pathogen, you now have it introduced